Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I should probably explain how we ended up living in that neighborhood to begin with. My mom had gotten remarried, and her second husband thought it would be good for everyone to have a fresh start somewhere new. So we all moved together, me, my brother, my biological sister, my stepsister, who had 3 kids already, and my mom, who was heavily pregnant with what would be my youngest sister. That made for a pretty crowded house, and we definitely didn't have much money to spare. There was another family living directly across the street from us. They had 2 kids, a girl around my age, and a boy who was maybe a year older than her. Right from the start, all of us kids absolutely loved that boy. He was the type who would share his toys with everyone, and he was always offering to help the little ones tie their shoes or reach something they couldn't get to on their own. Just the sweetest kid you could imagine. His sister was the exact opposite. She would hit other kids without any reason, call them horrible names, and act like she was better than everyone else in the neighborhood. Thinking about it now as an adult, she was basically a bully, though we didn't really use that word back then. This whole thing happened when Cabbage Patch dolls were at the peak of their popularity. Every single kid wanted one. They were all over the commercials, and kids at school would show them off constantly. Our family couldn't afford to buy them, not with how many people we had to feed and clothe. But our grandmother came through for us and made homemade dolls that looked similar to Cabbage Patch dolls. She made 6 total, 1 for each of the girls in our family. We absolutely treasured those dolls. Then they vanished. All 6 of them just disappeared one day. We searched everywhere in the house, turned everything upside down looking for them. And it wasn't just the dolls either. Other toys started disappearing too. Our parents assumed we were being careless and leaving things outside or in the yard. They sat us all down and gave us a long lecture about taking better care of our belongings. Maybe a week after that, the kids from across the street invited us over to play at their house. I went along with my siblings and cousins, and at some point during the afternoon, the girl decided she wanted to show me her bedroom. She spent the whole time bragging about how many toys she had and showing off everything. Then I spotted it. Sitting right there in her toy box was one of our dolls. I picked it up and recognized it immediately. The fabric, the stitching, everything about it was exactly like the ones our grandmother had made. I asked her where she got the doll from. She told me her dad had bought it for her. I didn't argue with her or make a scene. I just smiled and nodded and went back downstairs with everyone else. But inside I was absolutely fuming. I waited until she was outside playing with my cousins in the backyard, completely focused on whatever game they were playing. Then I went back upstairs and started pulling toys out of her toy box. My siblings noticed what I was doing and immediately started helping without me even needing to explain. We grabbed what we could carry and hauled everything across the street to our house, while our cousins kept her distracted outside. We dumped the whole pile of toys on our living room floor and were still going through everything when her mother came over to our house, absolutely screaming at the top of her lungs. She was yelling that we had robbed her daughter and demanding that someone call the police immediately. She kept insisting we were thieves who had stolen from a little girl. My mom and aunt started yelling right back at her. Everyone was shouting over each other, and the noise was incredible. I stayed completely silent through all of it. I just picked up my doll, flipped it upside down, and lifted up the little dress it was wearing. See, my mom was really obsessive about making sure all our stuff was labeled. With so many kids in one house, she wanted to avoid any arguments about who owned what. Every single thing we had either had our name sewn into it or written on it with permanent marker. Right there, written clearly inside the doll's dress, was my name. Her mother insisted it didn't prove anything and that it was just some kind of coincidence. I didn't say anything back to her. I just picked up the other 5 dolls one by one and showed her the names written inside each of their dresses. All different names, all different handwriting, but every single one clearly marked. She started getting even louder, insisting that her husband had bought all those dolls for their daughter and we were making the whole thing up. Right at that moment, Her husband walked through the front door. He'd just gotten home from work and walked straight into absolute chaos. His wife screaming, my mom and aunt yelling back, kids everywhere, and toys scattered all across our living room floor. His wife immediately started complaining to him about us, telling him we were thieves, and we'd stolen everything from their daughter. He raised his hand to get her to stop talking and asked me to show him the doll. I handed it over without saying a word. I hadn't actually spoken out loud since we'd brought all the toys back to our house. He examined the name written inside the dress. I watched his entire expression change. Then he turned to face his daughter. He told her she was grounded for 2 months, 1 month for stealing and another month for lying about it. Her mouth fell open in shock. Her mother started sputtering and protesting, still insisting that we were the actual thieves and her daughter had done nothing wrong. He looked at his wife with an expression that made it clear he was done listening to her. He said he had never bought their daughter a doll like that one. He also pointed out that he seriously doubted he could find a Cabbage Patch doll with my specific name sewn into it, even if he spent all day searching for one. He was absolutely livid. He told both of them to go home immediately right that second. Then he turned to all of us kids and asked if we had enough room in our house for all those toys. I'm pretty sure now, looking back as an adult, that he knew perfectly well only a small fraction of those toys actually belonged to us. He had to know we'd technically stolen from his daughter the same way she'd stolen from us, but I think he also suspected she'd been stealing from other kids in the neighborhood, and he'd had enough. We told him yes, we definitely had room for everything. He told us to keep them all. He did let her brother come over to our house and look through the pile to pick out anything that was actually his. And when the other kids who lived a few houses down heard from the brother about what had happened and what we'd found in her toy box, they asked if they could come look through everything too. Turns out she'd been stealing from half the kids on our street. By the time everyone had gone through the pile and claimed back what belonged to them, she didn't have a single toy left. And once word spread around the neighborhood about what she'd been doing, none of the other kids wanted anything to do with her anymore. She ended up losing everything, all her toys and all her friends too. Her brother still came around to play with us sometimes, and he was always really apologetic about what his sister had done. He stayed just as sweet as he'd always been. We held on to those homemade dolls our grandmother made for us for years and years after that whole incident. I'm 19 now, but this whole thing went down when I was about 13. Last week, I finally asked my dad what happened to that birthday present he promised me years back, and I wasn't ready for what he told me. Back when I was 13, I was completely obsessed with Minecraft. My dad and I would spend hours playing together on the Xbox 360 version. I was doing pretty well in school, getting good grades and all that, so he figured it was time we upgraded to playing on computers instead. He already had a decent setup for his work, he was a programmer and IT administrator at the time, and he wanted to get me something affordable since we could use Wi-Fi instead of being stuck with just the Xbox. Money was super tight back then. We just moved and had to pay double rent for a bit. My mom lost her job, and our car broke down all around the same time. It was rough, so whatever we got had to be cheap and used. My dad found someone selling stuff on one of those Facebook buy and sell groups. It was this girl he and my mom had met a few years earlier at a nightclub where he used to DJ sometimes. She was getting rid of a bunch of things because she was moving in with her boyfriend and her kids. One of the items was a laptop. Nothing special, kind of beat up looking, but she said only the network port didn't work. For 50 euros, my dad figured it was worth trying, especially since he could fix most computer problems himself. He messaged her and arranged to pick it up right before my birthday. He had to wait for his paycheck to come through first. When the day came, he drove to the spot they'd agreed on, but she never showed up. She called him later that same day with this excuse about how her boyfriend needed to wipe the hard drive first because she didn't trust my dad not to snoop through her files. My dad told her he had zero interest in looking at her personal stuff and that he could help her wipe it himself since, IT guy and all. Her response was insane. She told him no, that her boyfriend worked for the CIA and was a hacker. Yeah, apparently this dude named Hans something or other, the most German name you've ever heard, was a CIA hacker living in Germany. My dad just went along with it because, whatever, he just wanted the laptop. She kept insisting it worked fine except for that network port. A week later, my dad finally met up with her, paid the 50 euros, and brought the laptop home. He couldn't test it right there because the battery was completely dead. When he got home and plugged it in, nothing. Totally dead. He opened it up to see if it was something simple he could fix, and the inside was disgusting. There was this crusty mixture of what looked like nicotine stains, coffee, and other mystery liquids all over everything. When he tried to lift up the keyboard, it made this sound. I was standing right next to him because I was so excited to get my laptop running. It sounded exactly like Velcro being ripped apart. That sound is burned into my brain forever. I cried the entire night. My dad contacted her right away. She immediately got defensive and said that he must have broken it because it was working yesterday. Then she had the nerve to ask for 10 more euros for the bag she'd put it in. My dad stayed calm on the outside, but I remember him locking himself in his office for like 4 hours straight. He told me and my mom not to go in there for the next few days. Now here's where it gets good. Remember how I said my dad was an IT administrator? He was really good at his job. Like, guest lecturer at university's good. He'd give talks at conferences about data recovery and stuff like that. He pulled the hard drive out of the dead laptop and plugged it into his work computer to investigate. Turns out super hacker CIA Hans had just done a basic format of the drive, which doesn't actually delete anything permanently. My dad started recovering files to see if there were any logs showing the laptop had been used recently like she claimed. The most recent files were from 6 months earlier. The system logs showed the laptop had been properly shut down, it had just died, and never turned back on. Everything pointed to this thing being dead for at least half a year. Great work, Hans. On the second evening of his investigation, my dad found some photos. There were pictures of an older man holding a guitar, some shots from back in the nightclub days, normal stuff. Then I heard my dad start laughing from inside his office. The door was locked and he wouldn't let me in, which annoyed me at the time. Now I totally understand why. Apparently she had some really inappropriate photos on there involving spaghetti. Like, lots of spaghetti. With sauce. I'm not going into detail, but my dad couldn't believe someone actually paid a photographer for that kind of thing. He tried being reasonable and asked for his money back. He even offered to help her recover her files without mentioning the spaghetti situation. She completely lost it and started attacking him publicly on Facebook. She made posts asking what she should do about some guy trying to blackmail her. She wrote that she didn't want his pictures. Then she threatened that when her boyfriend learned about this, he'd hack my dad. The private messages got worse. She told him to shut up about the stupid laptop and give her the 10 euros for the bag, or else she'd tell everyone he wanted to grape her. She threw in a bunch of insults too. My dad had enough. He deactivated his Facebook account and went completely silent. He almost lost his job and things got really tense with my mom. But he'd been smart enough to save all the chat logs with her. He showed everything to my mom and his boss to prove he wasn't blackmailing anyone or sending inappropriate pictures to anyone. Not yet, anyway. A few months passed. My dad made a new Facebook account, didn't add his boss this time, and didn't use his real name. Things got back to normal. He landed a better job. He even joined this Facebook group for people who used to go to that old nightclub just to reconnect with some old friends. Then one day, he saw a new post in the group. It was from her asking if anyone had pictures from the old days because a thief had supposedly stolen her laptop and deleted all her photos by trying to blackmail her. My dad got this evil grin on his face when he told me this part last week. He typed out a response saying, "Hey, long time no see," and that he had quite a lot of pictures from back then. He mentioned finding them on an old hard drive, even some of her and her boyfriend at a nice pasta dinner. He said he also had screenshots with old chat logs. Then he asked if she wanted him to send them privately or just share them in the group. She told him to just share them there. So he did. He posted everything. And yes, he made sure to include the photos of her recently deceased father with the guitar. The nice ones. Facebook went absolutely crazy, at least in our corner of it. Within weeks, everything fell apart for her. All her friends dropped her immediately. Turns out she'd pulled similar stuff before with another guy from the nightclub scene, got him fired and kicked out of their friend group. He was actually the person who'd created that Facebook group in the first place. People started tagging her and her boyfriend in all the photos. Someone even tagged her cat in one of them. Her boyfriend Hans had been with her for 12 years. He recognized one of her tattoos that he'd paid for, so the photo had to be recent. He recognized the bed, but the guy in the spaghetti pictures definitely wasn't him. Just like that, Hans was on his own. My dad hadn't really looked closely at the pictures before posting them, but someone else noticed that in the background of the spaghetti photos, she'd laid out a bunch of drugs, weed, pills in plastic bags, that kind of thing. The other guy's current girlfriend saw it and reported it to the police, Child Protective Services, and both sets of parents. The police couldn't do much with old photos, but their kids got taken away for a while. I don't know what happened with that afterward. Some of her co-workers saw the post too. She quit her job at Aldi pretty soon after that. She had to move out of Hans' place and apparently moved across the country. We found her new Facebook account later. She'd used her cat's name for it. I know it sounds like we're being spiteful, and maybe we are, but I think she got what she deserved. Plus, we got our 50 euros back from selling the hard drive and RAM for 30 euros each. My dad used that money to buy me a used desktop computer instead. I could play Minecraft at 30 frames per second, which coming from the Xbox 360 felt perfect. For my 17th birthday, I got a brand new computer, no spaghetti pictures included. My dad and I still play Minecraft together today. He's a software developer at a bigger company now, and we're doing way better financially. Not rich or anything, but not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. He even went to Minecon once, showed up in a cape and everything. I've been a nurse in the emergency room for about 5 years now, and it's one of the most rewarding yet challenging jobs I've ever had. I clocked in at 7 that day, did my rounds, checked on the patients we already had in triage. Everything was running smoothly until about 10 p.m. when the ambulance brought in a car accident victim. The patient was in critical condition, multiple injuries, bleeding heavily. The entire team sprang into action. We had doctors, nurses, everyone working together to stabilize them. It was one of those life or death situations where every second counted. Outside of all this chaos, I've been taking self-defense classes for about 2 years. It started as just a way to stay fit and feel safer walking to my car after late night shifts, but I'd gotten pretty good at it. I went twice a week, learned various holds, how to break free from grabs, how to defend myself if someone attacked me. Never in a million years did I think I'd actually need to use those skills at work. So there we were, all hands on deck with this critical patient when this woman burst through the emergency room doors. She was dragging her son behind her, who looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. The kid had a small scratch on his arm, nothing serious from what I could see, but she was acting like he'd lost a limb. She walked straight up to the nurse's station, where I was updating patient charts, and slammed her hand down on the desk. She announced loudly that her son needed to be seen immediately. I looked up from my work and gave her a polite smile, even though I was exhausted and stressed from the critical case we were handling. I told her I understood she was concerned and asked her to explain what happened. She explained in an angry tone that he had scratched his arm at the playground and that it could get infected. She insisted that she needed a doctor to see him right away. I looked at the boy's arm. It was literally just a surface scratch, barely even bleeding anymore. I acknowledged that it must have been scary for him, but explained that we currently had patients with more serious injuries that needed immediate attention. I asked her politely if she could take a seat in the waiting area and promised we'd get to her son as soon as we could. She refused outright. She told me they weren't waiting and asked if I had any idea how busy she was. She claimed she didn't have time to sit around in some waiting room. I explained again that there were people with more serious injuries waiting to be seen. I asked her once more to please take a seat and wait her turn, assuring her we'd be able to help her son as soon as possible. Her voice got even louder when she refused to sit and wait while her son was in pain. She demanded that he be seen right now. Her voice was getting louder, and I could see other patients in the waiting area starting to stare. The boy looked embarrassed, tugging on his mother's sleeve like he wanted her to stop making a scene. I told her I understood her concern for her son, but reminded her that there were other patients who also needed medical attention. I explained that we had a protocol in place for triaging patients and that her son would have to wait his turn like everyone else. She shouted that this was outrageous and asked if I knew who she was. She demanded to speak to my manager right away. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. In the background, I could hear the urgent voices of the medical team still working on the critical patient. Every minute this woman was taken up was a minute I could have been helping with that case. I told her again that I understood she was upset, but asked her to please try to understand that we were doing the best we could to help all our patients. I requested one more time that she be patient and wait her turn, promising we'd be able to help her son as soon as possible. She told me not to dare tell her to be patient. She yelled that her son was injured and I was refusing to treat him. She called it discrimination and threatened to sue the entire hospital. She continued ranting, getting louder and more aggressive with each word. Other staff members were starting to notice the commotion. I could see one of the security guards beginning to walk over from his post near the entrance. She called me incompetent and said I shouldn't even be working there. She asked what kind of nurse refuses to help a child. I clarified that I wasn't refusing to help her son. I explained that we had to prioritize patients based on the severity of their injuries and that this was standard procedure at every hospital. That's when she completely lost it. Before I even realized what was happening, she reached across the desk and grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking it hard. The pain was immediate and shocking. For a split second I froze, but then my training kicked in. Without even thinking, my body moved on instinct. I grabbed her wrist with both hands, twisted it in a specific way I practiced hundreds of times in class, and used her own momentum against her. Within seconds, I had her down on her knees, her arm controlled in a position where she couldn't move without causing herself pain. She let out this high-pitched shriek that echoed through the entire emergency room. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared. The security guards rushed over immediately. The guard asked what happened here. I told him she had assaulted me and that I was holding her until they could take over. The guards took control of her and I let go, stepping back. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline. She was still screaming, threatening to sue everyone, claiming I'd attacked her unprovoked. Her son was crying now, clearly embarrassed by his mother's behavior. Another nurse came over to check on me while the guards escorted her toward the exit. She fought them the entire way, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits and how she'd have all of our jobs. The poor kid was left standing there until a social worker came to sit with him while they sorted everything out. The hospital called the police, who arrived about 15 minutes later. They took statements from me, from the other nurses who'd witnessed it, from patients in the waiting area. The CCTV footage showed everything clearly. There was no question about who had been the aggressor. The officers arrested her right there. She was still shouting when they put her in handcuffs and read her rights. They took her away in the police car while Child Protective Services came to pick up her son and contact his father. After everything calmed down, my supervisor pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. She offered to let me take the rest of the night off. I told her I was fine and reminded her that we still had that critical patient who needed help. I went back to work, but my mind kept replaying what had happened. I decided that night that I was going to press charges. What she did wasn't just assault. It was an attack on a healthcare worker trying to do her job. If I didn't hold her accountable, what message would that send? The trial was 3 months later. I had to take a day off work to appear in court. She showed up with her lawyer, dressed nicely, trying to look sympathetic. Her lawyer tried to argue that she'd been stressed and worried about her son, that she'd acted out of maternal instinct. But the prosecutor had the CCTV footage. They had statements from multiple witnesses. They had photos of the bruising on my scalp where she'd yanked my hair. Her lawyer had nothing to counter with. The prosecutor asked witness after witness if the defendant had grabbed my hair. Each one confirmed what happened. When it was my turn to testify, I explained calmly and clearly what had occurred. I described the critical patient we'd been treating, the standard triage protocol, how she'd become increasingly aggressive, and finally how she'd physically attacked me. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found her guilty of assault on a healthcare worker. The judge looked stern when he delivered the sentence. He told her she would serve 6 months in county jail and pay a fine of $5,000. He explained that, upon release, she would complete 200 hours of community service and attend anger management classes for 1 year. He asked if she understood. She tried to argue and said it was unfair, but the judge just gavelled her down. He said that the sentence reflected the seriousness of her actions. He said that healthcare workers deserved to do their jobs without fear of physical assault. Then he adjourned the court. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.